Zarakth had seen many battles. She was a commander in the Velkari forces, and her people were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors. Her body carried the marks of 17 major fights. Burn scars from plasma weapons crossed her chest. Impact marks dotted her arms where bullets had struck her armor. Each scar was a badge of honor among her kind. But in all those years of fighting, in all those desperate battles against enemies like the Scourge, the Hive Collective and the Crimson Legion, she had never truly understood what it meant to be afraid. Fear was something other species felt, not warriors like her. That changed the day she met humans. The mission started like any other. The Galactic Council received a distress call from a research station on a planet called Kepler 442b. It was far from the core worlds, out on the edge of explored space. The Scourge had been spotted near that sector. Everyone knew what that meant. The Scourge were terrible creatures like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and acid that could melt through steel. They killed everything in their path. Zarakth led one of 3 teams sent to help. Her ship arrived first. Through the viewport, she could see the research station below. Its shields were flickering. They were about to fail. Around the station, she could see the Scourge. Hundreds of them. They were swarming the building like ants on sugar, but something caught her attention. Near the main entrance, there was a small group fighting back. They were not running. They were not hiding. They were actually pushing the Scourge away from the door. Zarakth felt curious. What species would be crazy enough to stand and fight against those numbers? Her ship landed near the entrance. Zarakth and her team jumped out, weapons ready. That was when she got her first good look at the Defenders humans. She had heard about them. Everyone had. They were new to the galaxy. The Council had only accepted them 3 cycles ago. Most species thought humans were weak. They had no natural weapons. No claws, no thick skin, no venom. By all logic, they should have been prey animals, not predators. But what Zarakth saw did not match what she had been told. There were only 5 humans. Just 5, and they were fighting at least 40 Scourge warriors. The humans wore basic armor. Their weapons were old-style kinetic guns, the kind that shot metal bullets instead of plasma beams. Nothing fancy, nothing advanced, yet they were winning. One human led the group. He was a male with dark hair and a scar on his left cheek. Later, Zarakth would learn his name was Jake Martinez. He moved like water, smooth and fast. He shouted orders to his team while shooting his rifle. When a Scourge jumped at him, Jake did not step back. He stepped forward. He drove a knife into the creature's throat. Then he spun and shot 2 more Scourge that were trying to flank him. Next to Jake was a woman with red hair tied in a braid. Her name was Claire Brooks. She held a tool that had been changed into a weapon. It shot fire in wide arcs. The flames caught the Scourge and they screamed as they burned. When her weapon got too hot, Claire did not panic. She grabbed a dead Scourge's bioweapon and used it against the others. The 3rd human was a strong-looking man named Danny Chen. He had set up a barrier made of metal boxes and debris. He fired his rifle carefully. Each shot killed a Scourge. When too many tried to rush his position, Danny pressed a button. Explosives he had planted blew up. Pieces of Scourge flew everywhere. The last 2 humans were twins. A brother and sister named Kyle and Katie Morrison. They moved together like they shared one mind. When Kyle turned left, Katie covered his right. When Katie reloaded, Kyle stepped in front of her. They created a zone of death. Any Scourge that entered did not leave. Zarakth and her team joined the fight. Together, they pushed the Scourge back. The aliens retreated, leaving their dead behind. Finally, the area was clear. Jake turned to face Zarakth. His face was dirty with blood and grime, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He held out his hand. Zarakth knew this was a human greeting. She took his hand. His grip was firm and strong. "Thanks for the help," Jake said. His voice was rough but steady. "We have wounded people inside. The Scourge will come back soon. We need to get everyone out and destroy this place before they return." Zarakth felt the strength in his handshake. She had fought beside many species, but something about these humans was different. They did not fight with cold efficiency like her people. They did not fight with calculated precision like the Talreth. They fought with something raw, something primal. She could see it burning in their eyes. "Agreed," Zarakth said. "My team will help evacuate." "How many survivors?" 12 researchers, Claire answered. She wiped her face with a cloth. "All of them are civilians. We have been holding this position for 6 hours. 6 hours. These 5 humans had held off the scourge for 6 hours. Zarak felt something strange in her chest. It was not quite respect, though that was part of it. It was something deeper, something that made her rethink everything she knew about this species. They worked quickly. The station's systems were failing. More scourge would come. Jake and Danny stayed at the entrance, keeping guard. The others helped move the wounded and the researchers to the ships. Zarak watched the humans work. They moved with purpose. Every action had meaning. When one researcher started to panic, Katie was there. Her voice was calm and gentle despite the blood on her armor. When part of the ceiling fell, Kyle was already moving. He pulled 2 of Zarak's soldiers out of the way just in time. Then the alarms went crazy. The sensors showed 300 scourge coming fast from 3 different directions. "We are out of time," Jake said. His jaw was tight. "Danny, set the bombs. Everyone else run to the ships now." The evacuation became a fighting retreat. The scourge hit them from all sides. It was a coordinated attack meant to trap and kill them. Zarak's team formed a rear guard with the humans. They laid down covering fire while the civilians ran to the ships. Then Zarak saw something that would stay in her memory forever. Jake was covering the retreat when a Scourge Alpha appeared. It was massive, twice the size of a normal Scourge warrior. It burst through a wall like paper. It moved incredibly fast. Its claws were aimed at Claire. She had her back turned. She was helping a wounded researcher and did not see the danger. Jake did not think. He did not calculate. He just moved. He threw himself between Claire and the Alpha. The creature's claws went through his armor like it was nothing. Zarak heard Jake scream. But even as he fell, even as his blood poured onto the floor, Jake fired his rifle into the Alpha's face. He emptied the entire weapon into its skull. The Alpha fell dead. Jake did not get up. Claire's scream was unlike anything Zarak had ever heard. It was rage and grief and fury all mixed together into one terrible sound. Claire turned and saw Jake's body. Something in her face changed. Something frightening. What happened next made no sense. Claire ran toward the Scourge horde, not away from it. Toward it, she did not call for help. She did not look back. She just ran forward, shooting, directly into a force that should have killed her in seconds. The Morrison twins followed her without a word. So did Danny Chen. The 4 humans became a storm of violence. They fought with a savagery that made the Scourge look timid. Claire tore through the enemy like a natural disaster. Her weapon left trails of burning scourge behind her. The Morrison twins protected her sides with mechanical precision. Danny moved forward steadily, killing everything that came near. It was not just their skill. It was their refusal to stop. When they ran out of bullets, they used knives. When the knives broke, they used pieces of metal, their fists, anything they could grab. Katie Morrison lost her left arm to a scourge's bite. She simply switched her gun to her right hand and kept fighting. Zarak and her team stood frozen for a moment. Then instinct took over. They joined the fight. Together they cut through the scourge. They pushed the aliens back long enough for the last civilians to reach the ships. When they finally pulled back, the humans were barely standing. Katie had passed out from blood loss. Kyle carried her, refusing to leave her behind. Danny's armor was full of holes. Claire looked like she had been dipped in alien blood. But everyone made it to the ships. Danny triggered the bombs from his remote. As they flew away, the research station exploded in a massive fireball. The remaining scourge died in the blast. On Zarak's ship, the medic worked desperately to save Katie Morrison. Zarak walked to where Claire sat. The human woman was leaning against a wall, staring at nothing. She held Jake's identification tags in her hand. "You should not have charged them," Zarak said quietly. "It was tactically wrong. You could have all died." Claire looked up. Zarak saw something in those eyes that made her feel cold inside. "He was one of ours," Claire said simply. "We do not leave our people behind. And we make them pay for every single person they take from us." That was the moment. That was when Zarak first understood fear. Not fear of the humans themselves, but fear of what they represented. Fear of what it meant that a species this young, this physically weak, could fight with such absolute conviction. Fear of what would happen when humanity brought their full strength to bear. The galaxy had been fighting the scourge for generations. The council races fought with discipline and technology. They won through superior coordination. But humans fought with something else. Something that could not be measured. They fought with. 3 months passed after the battle at Kepler 442b. Zarak, found herself on a human ship called the Eagle's Pride. It was a mid-sized military vessel that worked with both human and council forces. She had requested a transfer to work with humans. The council approved it quickly. They wanted better relationships with humanity. But Zarakth had different reasons. She needed to understand what she had seen. She needed to know what made humans fight the way they did. The Eagle's Pride was different from any ship she had served on before. Council ships were designed for maximum efficiency. Everything was logical and organized. The hallways were plain. The rooms were simple, but the human ship felt alive. The crew had put personal items in their quarters. Pictures of family, small decorations. The mess hall had schedules for something called sports games. Music played softly through the corridors. Different types from different times in human history. Her main contact was the ship's captain. Her name was Lisa Grant. She was a veteran who had fought in wars on Earth before humans reached space. Captain Grant was professional and efficient, but she was also surprisingly friendly and welcoming. "Commander Zarakth," Grant said when they first met in her office. "I read the reports from Kepler 442b. Claire Brooks said good things about your team. I am sorry for your losses too." Zarakth bowed her head in respect. "And I am sorry for yours. Jake Martinez died saving one of my people. That is a debt we cannot repay." Grant's face softened. Jake knew the risks, we all do. But that is why we are here. To make sure fewer people have to die. Over the next few weeks, Zarakth dove deep into human culture and military thinking. She attended briefings. She participated in training. She spent long hours talking with the crew. What she learned both fascinated and disturbed her. Humans had a concept they called escalation dominance. It was more than just military strategy. It was a philosophy built into how they thought. When someone threatened them, humans did not just respond equally. They responded with overwhelming force. They believed the only way to stop aggression was to make it so costly that no sane enemy would try it. But what really set humans apart was their ability to switch between gentleness and savagery. They could be kind and compassionate with their own people. They could laugh and create art and show tender emotions. Yet they could flip to utterly ruthless violence in an instant when needed. Most species could not do both. Humans could. One evening, Zarakth was eating with several crew members in the mess hall. She decided to ask the question that had been bothering her. "I watched your people charge into certain death at Kepler 442b, she said to a soldier named Peter Collins. He was older with many scars. "You did not retreat. You did not think about the odds. You just attacked. Why?" Collins took a long drink of his coffee before answering. "Because retreat was not an option. Jake was down. The evacuation was still happening. Someone had to buy time. We were the ones there." "But you could have taken a defensive position," Zarakth pressed. Charging forward made no tactical sense. A younger officer named Amy Foster leaned forward. She had kind eyes. "Commander, with respect, you are thinking like a warrior. We were thinking like humans. I do not understand the difference." Foster smiled sadly. "Warriors fight to win battles. Humans fight to survive. Our entire evolution was about fighting predators that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We did not have claws. We did not have venom. We did not have thick skin. What we had was our brains, our tools, and our absolute refusal to give up. On Earth," Collins added, "we were prey animals. Saber-toothed cats hunted us. Bears hunted us. Wolves hunted us. Everything wanted to eat us. But we survived by being the most stubborn and mean prey those predators ever met. We hunted them back. We hunted everything back. That is who we are." The words hit Zarakth hard. Her own people, the Velkari, were top predators on their world. They had evolved as hunters. Fighting was natural to them, but they had always been at the top. They never had to climb from the bottom. Humans had no such advantage. They had fought their way up from being prey, and they remembered every step of that climb. That memory had shaped them into something terrifying. Her understanding grew deeper during a training exercise 2 weeks later. The scenario was simple. A space station had been taken over by hostile forces. They held civilians hostage. Mixed teams of humans and council soldiers had to assault the station, kill the hostiles, and save the civilians. Zarakth was paired with a human named Ryan Hughes. He was quiet but smart. Their team also had 2 of her soldiers and 3 other humans. The exercise started well. They entered the station and cleared the first areas. They moved toward the hostage location. Then the simulation changed. Suddenly there were many more hostile forces. They surrounded the team and cut off the retreat. Zarakth immediately started planning their escape. They were outnumbered 3-1. Standard tactics said to retreat and wait for backup. Hughes had different ideas. "We are not retreating," he said calmly while studying the tactical display. "We are pushing forward." "That is suicide," one of Zarakth's soldiers objected. "We will be overwhelmed." "Only if we fight fair," Hughes replied. He pointed to the station's environmental controls on the screen. "See that? We can vent sections of the station. Blow the atmosphere out into space. That would also kill the hostages," Zarakth said. "Not if we get to them first." Hughes was already moving. His team followed without question. "We hit hard and fast. Grab the hostages and get them to the safe section before we vent. The enemy will not expect it. They think we are trapped." It was crazy. It was risky. It broke many standard rules. It worked perfectly. The humans moved like a well-oiled machine. Each one knew what the others would do. They cut through the hostile forces with brutal efficiency. They reached the hostages and moved them to safety. Then Hughes triggered the environmental controls. The station's air exploded out into space. All the remaining hostiles died instantly. The exercise ended with a perfect score. All hostages saved. All enemies dead. No friendly casualties. After the exercise, Captain Grant spoke to all the teams. "Excellent work, Lieutenant Hughes," she said. "Your solution was unconventional but effective. However, I want everyone to understand something. What Lieutenant Hughes did was not reckless. It was calculated aggression. Humans are very good at that." She looked at everyone, both human and non-human soldiers. "There is a saying on Earth," Grant continued. "If you are in a fair fight, your tactics are bad. We do not believe in fair fights. We believe in winning by whatever means necessary. That is not savagery. That is survival instinct refined over millions of years." Zarakth felt the words resonate deep inside her. She was beginning to understand. Humans did not fight with cold discipline like the Velkhari. They fought with heat and passion. They were willing to embrace chaos if it meant achieving their goal. That night, Zarakth could not sleep. She went to the observation deck. The stars streaked past as the ship traveled at sublight speed. She was not alone. Claire Brooks stood by the window. Her reflection looked ghostly in the glass. Claire had recovered physically from Kepler 442b, but Zarakth could see the emotional damage. She still wore Jake's identification tags around her neck. "Could not sleep either?" Claire asked without turning around. "No," Zarakth admitted. She stood beside the human. "I have been trying to understand your people. I thought I was beginning to grasp it. But there is something I still cannot figure out." "What is that?" "You fight with such ferocity and ruthlessness, yet outside of combat you are gentle and compassionate. You form bonds with other species. You create art and music. You laugh and cry and love. How can you be both things at once?" Claire was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Because we have to be," she said. "On Earth we have a term, the thin veneer of civilization. It means that all our art, our culture, our compassion, it is built on top of our survival instincts. It is not fake, it is real, but it is also fragile. When that veneer is threatened, when someone we care about is in danger, the old instincts come back." She finally turned to face Zarakth. Her eyes were haunted. Jake understood that. He knew that the price of keeping our civilization intact, of protecting the things we love, sometimes means embracing the violence we are capable of. We do not like it. We do not celebrate it, but we accept it as part of who we are. "And that is why you charged the scourge," Zarakth said quietly. "Not because you were angry, because you were afraid." Claire's laugh was bitter. "Afraid we would lose more people. Afraid we would fail. Afraid that Jake's sacrifice would mean nothing." "Yes, Commander, we were terrified. But fear does not make us freeze. It makes us fight harder." The words hung in the air. Zarakth finally understood the truth. Humans were not fearless. They were driven by fear. Every act of courage, every moment of savage violence came from the terror of loss. They fought so hard because they had so much to lose. Their bonds with each other, their love for their homes, their desperate need to protect what they had built. The Velkhari fought because they were warriors. It was their nature. Humans fought because they were survivors who had become protectors, and that made them far more dangerous. "Thank you," Zarakth said finally. "I think I am beginning to understand." Claire nodded and turned back to the window. The alarm went off at 4 in the morning, ship time. Zarakth was in the training room with Sergeant Collins when the sirens started. Red lights bathed the hallways. The crew rushed to their battle stations. All hands battle stations, Captain Grant's voice came over the speakers. This is not a drill. Scourge fleet detected, bearing 273 Mark 18. Estimated strength is 40 capital ships with unknown support craft. They are heading for Harmony Station. Zarakth felt her blood turn cold. Harmony Station was not just another outpost. It was one of the largest civilian hubs in this sector. Over 50,000 people lived there. Families, children, scientists, and artists and regular people who had fled the war hoping for safety. And among them were 3,000 human colonists. The bridge was controlled chaos when Zarakth arrived. Tactical displays showed the Scourge fleet moving forward like a red tide. The Council had ships in the sector, but they were hours away. The Eagle's Pride and 2 other vessels were all that stood between the Scourge and the station. Options, Grant demanded from her command chair. None that keep us alive. The tactical officer replied grimly. We are outnumbered 13-1. Even if we fight a delaying action, the station's shields will not hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Then we buy time the hard way, Grant said. Weapons prep every missile. Engineering divert all non-essential power to shields and engines. Communications, send a priority message to Harmony Station. They need to start evacuating now. Captain, Lieutenant Hughes spoke from the navigation station. Even if we engage, the evacuation will not be complete before they reach the station. There is not enough transport capacity. Grant's jaw tightened. Zarakth saw the terrible calculation in her eyes. Save some and lose others, or lose everyone trying to save them all. We are not abandoning anyone, Grant said firmly. Helm set intercept course. Maximum speed. We will give them every second we can. As the Eagle's Pride surged forward, Zarakth moved to Grant's side. Captain, I must advise against this, she said quietly. 3 ships cannot stop that fleet. We will be destroyed. Grant met her gaze steadily. Probably. But if we do not try, 50,000 people will definitely die. Those are unacceptable odds, Commander. Your courage is admirable, but this is suicide. Maybe. Grant smiled grimly. But you know what my great-grandmother used to say? She fought in Earth's Second World War. She said when you are outnumbered and outgunned, the only thing you can do is make them wish they had picked a different fight. The word sent a chill through Zarakth. She recognized that tone. It was the same one Claire had used before charging the Scourge at Kepler 442b. The humans were not planning to delay the Scourge. They were planning to make them pay. The battle began at long range. The Eagle's Pride and her sister ships opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles streaked across the void. Railgun rounds traveled at incredible speeds. The space between the fleets became a zone of light and death. The Scourge responded with their bioplasma cannons, weapons that turned their own organic matter into superheated projectiles. 2 Scourge cruisers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by nuclear fire. But there were so many more. For every ship destroyed, 3 more pressed forward. Resolute's shields are down, the tactical officer reported. She is taking heavy fire. Grant did not hesitate. Helm put us between them and Resolute. All power to forward shields. The Eagle's Pride turned, absorbing fire meant for the wounded vessel. The ship shuddered under the impacts. Alarms screamed as systems failed. Shields at 40%, engines at 60% efficiency. Fire in the port battery. Damage control teams responding. Through it all, Grant remained calm. She issued orders with mechanical precision, but Zarakth could see the strain in her eyes. The knowledge that they were losing. Then the Defiant exploded. One moment it was there, weaving between Scourge ships and pouring fire into their ranks. The next, a Scourge dreadnought's main cannon punched through its reactor. The ship became a brief new star. 73 people gone in an instant. The bridge fell silent. Even through the chaos, the loss hit hard. Zarakth had trained with some of the Defiant's crew. Good soldiers. Good people. Grant's knuckles were white on her chair's armrest. Status on Harmony Station evacuation? 30% complete. They need at least another hour. Time until Scourge fleet reaches the station? 28 minutes. The math was cruel and simple. They had failed, but Grant was not done. Engineering, how long until the reactor goes critical if we remove all safety limiters? The chief engineer's voice crackled over the comm, confused. Captain, removing the limiters would cause a cascade failure. The ship would explode. I know. How long? A pause. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Captain, what are you planning? Grant turned to face the bridge crew. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. All hands, this is the captain. We cannot stop them, but we can slow them down. I am ordering a full evacuation to Resolute. You have 10 minutes to reach the escape pods and shuttles. Get to Resolute and help finish the evacuation at Harmony Station. Understanding dawned on the crew. Grant was planning to ram the Eagle's Pride into the Scourge fleet and detonate the reactor. A suicide run to buy time. Captain, no, Lieutenant Hughes protested. There has to be another way. There is not. And this is my choice, Lieutenant. I am not asking any of you to die with me. Get to the escape pods. That is an order. The crew hesitated. Then slowly they began moving toward the exits. But not all of them. Hughes returned to his station. With respect, Captain, someone needs to handle navigation. You cannot fly and fight at the same time. Lieutenant, I gave you an order. You also trained me to make my own tactical decisions. Hughes smiled grimly. This is mine. The weapons officer, a young woman named Katie Sullivan, stayed at her post. Somebody has to keep shooting. Might as well be me. 4 others stayed, including Claire Brooks, who had appeared on the bridge. I already lost Jake, she said simply. I am not losing the rest of my family. Zarakth stood frozen. The humans were choosing to die, not because they had to. They could evacuate. They could live. But they were choosing death instead, to buy minutes for people they did not know. And she realized something. All this time she thought she understood human fear, but she had only scratched the surface. Humans were not driven by fear of death. They were driven by fear of failing those they were sworn to protect. Before she could think, before her survival instincts could stop her, Zarakth moved to the tactical station. Commander? Grant looked at her, surprised. The Velkari do not abandon their battlemates, Zarakth said. Her voice was steady despite the terror inside her. If you are to make this sacrifice, you will not do it alone. Grant's eyes glistened. She nodded once. Honored to have you with us, Commander. The rest of the crew evacuated. 8 beings remained on the bridge of the Eagle's Pride. 7 humans and 1 Velkari preparing to become a funeral pyre. Engineering, remove all reactor safeties, Grant ordered. Helm, plot a course directly through their formation center. Maximum speed. Captain, the chief engineer's voice came over the comm. I am staying. Someone needs to manually hold the reactor together until you are in position. I can give you 5 more minutes. Chief, Grant's voice broke slightly. Thank you. It has been an honor, Captain. Give them hell. The Eagle's Pride accelerated, wounded and dying, but still lethal. The Scourge fleet sensed their intention and tried to scatter. But it was too late. Grant had timed it perfectly. As they plunged into the heart of the enemy formation, Katie Sullivan never stopped firing. Claire Brooks coordinated systems, keeping them alive through sheer will. Hughes wrestled with controls, keeping them on course despite the ship falling apart. Zarakth manned the weapons, targeting even as Scourge fire tore through the hull. She felt fear, true terror, for the first time in her life. But she felt something else, too, pride, honor, the knowledge that she was dying for something that mattered. This was what it meant to be human. 30 seconds to detonation, Grant announced calmly. It has been an honor serving with all of you. Likewise, Captain, Hughes replied. Claire looked at Jake's dog tags one last time. See you soon, Jake. Zarakth thought of her people and hoped they would understand why she made this choice. The reactor alarm screamed, then something grabbed Zarakth. Strong hands threw her backward. She tumbled into an escape pod. The door slammed shut. Through the viewport, she saw Claire's face. Blood-streaked, determined, the human woman hit the launch button. No! Zarakth screamed. But the pod was already launching. She watched helplessly as the Eagle's Pride drove into the Scourge formation. And then there was only light. Pain. That was the first thing Zarakth felt. Burning pain through her entire body. Her shell felt cracked. Her limbs would not move right. Her vision swam with static. But she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was alive. Commander? Commander Zarakth? Can you hear me? The voice was human, female, young. Zarakth tried to focus to understand where she was. Do not try to move. You are in the medical bay on Resolute. You were in pretty bad shape when we pulled you from the escape pod. Escape pod. Memory returned in pieces. The bridge, the decision to stay, the reactor alarm. And then something had grabbed her. Someone had physically thrown her into a pod. Claire. Where? Zarakth croaked. Her voice barely worked. Where are the others? The medic's expression told her everything before the words came. I am sorry, Commander. You were the only one who made it off the Eagle's Pride. The others stayed at their posts until the end. The grief hit like a physical blow. Grant, Hughes, Katie Sullivan, Claire, the chief engineer. All of them, gone. They had thrown her into that pod at the last second. They had given up their own chance at survival to save her. Why? Zarakth whispered. Why did they save me? The medic smiled sadly. Because you are family. And humans do not leave family behind. Over the following days, as Zarakth recovered, she learned the full story. The Eagle's Pride sacrifice had not been in vain. The explosion destroyed 7 Scourge capital ships and damaged a dozen more. The chaos and debris field bought Harmony Station the time it needed. 47,000 beings were evacuated successfully. The Scourge fleet, its momentum broken, had been forced to regroup. By the time they reached the station, Council reinforcements had arrived. The battle was brutal, but the station held. 9 human lives had bought salvation for 47,000. The numbers should have made it worthwhile. The math was simple and clear, yet Zarakth felt only emptiness. 2 weeks after the battle, she was cleared for duty. The Council had assigned her to a new posting, a command position with a mixed species task force. It was a promotion. Recognition of her actions at Harmony Station. It felt like an insult. Before accepting, Zarakth made a request. She wanted to attend the memorial service for the Eagle's Pride crew. The service was held on Earth, at a military cemetery overlooking the ocean. Thousands attended. Fellow soldiers, family members, civilians who had been saved from Harmony Station. The president gave a speech about sacrifice and duty and freedom. Zarakth barely heard the words. She stood at the back, alone among the crowd. Empty coffins were lowered into the ground. There were no bodies to bury. They had been vaporized with the ship. After the ceremony, she walked among the graves. So many names and dates. So many lives cut short. So many families left behind. She found Claire's marker. Someone had already left Jake's identification tags hanging on it. I do not understand. The voice came from beside her. An older human male. His hair was gray. His face was lined with age and grief. He wore a military dress uniform with many ribbons. Admiral Andrew Brooks, he said, extending his hand. Claire was my daughter. Zarakth took his hand carefully. Lieutenant Commander Zarakth. I served with her. She saved my life. Brooks nodded. I know. I read the reports. What do not you understand, Commander? Why she did it. Why any of them did it. They could have evacuated. They could have lived. Instead, they chose death. I do not understand why. Brooks was quiet for a long moment, staring at his daughter's grave. There is an old Earth saying, he finally said. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. That is from our religious texts, but the truth goes beyond faith. Humans are social creatures, Commander. We form bonds. We create families not just of blood but of choice, and we protect those families with everything we have. He turned to face her. She saw tears in his eyes. Claire lost Jake at Kepler. 442b, it nearly broke her. But she kept going because she had you and the others. You became her new family. And when the time came, she did what any parent, any sibling, any true friend would do. She made sure her family survived, even if it cost her everything. I could have stopped her, Zarakth said. Her voice broke. I tried to stay, I chose to die with them, but she threw me into that pod. She took my choice away. No, Brooks said firmly. She gave you a gift. The gift of life, yes, but more than that. She gave you the burden of remembering, of carrying their story forward. of making sure their sacrifice meant something. He placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was surprisingly comforting, despite their different species. The dead cannot tell their stories, Commander. The living must do it for them. That is your duty now. Not to die alongside them, but to live for them. To make sure the galaxy remembers what they did and why they did it. The words struck something deep inside Zarakth. She had been so focused on the sacrifice, on the loss, that she had not considered what came after. What responsibility the survivors carried. "I will," she said quietly. "I promise. Their names will not be forgotten." Brooks smiled through his tears. "Thank you. And Commander, there is something else you should understand. What my daughter and the others did, that is not exceptional by human standards. That is just who we are when things get desperate. We do not have the strength of the Velkhari. We do not have advanced technology. What we have is each other, and we will burn down the universe before we let our people fall." He looked out over the rows of graves, thousands of markers representing lives given in humanity's short time among the stars. The Scourge think they can break us through numbers. They do not understand that every human they kill just makes the rest of us more determined. Every family destroyed creates 1,000 new soldiers burning for justice. They awakened something in us, Commander. Something that will not sleep again until either they are destroyed or we are. Zarakth felt a chill. She had thought she understood human nature. She had seen their courage, their ferocity, their refusal to surrender. But only now did she truly comprehend what Admiral Brooks was saying. Humanity was not just fighting a war. They were fighting an existential crusade. And they would not stop, would not rest, would not show mercy until the threat to their people was eliminated. The Scourge had made a terrible mistake. They had given humanity a cause worth dying for, and nothing in the galaxy was more dangerous than a human with a cause. Before leaving Earth, Zarakth made one more stop. She visited the Human War Memorial, a massive structure in the capital that showed humanity's military history. Wars fought on Earth. Wars fought among the stars. She found a quote carved into the marble. It came from a human general from one of their ancient conflicts. "In war, there is no substitute for victory." 5 words that captured everything she had learned about humanity. They did not fight for honor or glory. They fought to win by whatever means necessary, and they would pay any price, make any sacrifice, to achieve that victory. As Zarakth boarded the transport that would take her to her new assignment, she looked back at Earth one last time. The blue-green world seemed so peaceful from orbit, so beautiful and serene. But she knew better now. She had seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. She had fought beside them, bled with them, and been saved by them. And for the first time since the battle, she felt something other than grief. She felt hope. Because if there was one species in the galaxy that could defeat the Scourge, that could turn the tide of this endless war, it was humanity. Not despite their fear, but because of it. Because their fear drove them to impossible acts of courage. Because they refused to let that fear control them. The Eagle's pride was gone. Its crew was dead. But their legacy would endure. Zarakth would make sure of it. She had learned that humans were not fearless warriors. They were terrified survivors who chose to stand and fight anyway. They were people who would sacrifice everything to protect what they loved, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. As the transport jumped to hyperspace, Zarakth made herself a promise. She would carry the story of the Eagle's pride and its crew. She would tell everyone about their sacrifice. She would make sure that Claire Brooks, Lisa Grant, Ryan Hughes, Katie Sullivan, and all the others were remembered, not as statistics, not as numbers in a casualty report, but as people who chose to give their lives so that others might live. That was the true measure of humanity. Not their technology or their tactics, but their willingness to stand between the innocent and the darkness no matter the cost. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant, and Zarakth would be there to witness it, because she had learned something important. When humans said they would protect you, they meant it, even if it killed them, especially if it killed them. That was both beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Harmony Station. 2 years during which the war against the Scourge had grown to levels the galaxy had never seen. What had once been scattered border fights had become a full-scale war for survival. The Scourge, sensing weakness in the divided council races, had launched a massive attack aimed at the heart of civilized space, and humanity had responded with terrifying efficiency. Commander Zarakth now held the rank of battle commander. She commanded a fleet of mixed council and human vessels. Her flagship was the warship Vengeance. The name was fitting. The entire human fleet had adopted names like that, Fury, Retribution, Wrath, Justice. They were not hiding their intentions anymore. Her second in command was Commander Nathan Cole. He was a veteran who had served in humanity's early wars. His face was weathered and scarred from a Scourge acid attack. No surgery could fully repair the damage, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. When it came to the enemy, he showed no mercy. "Battle Commander, we are receiving final coordination data from Fleet Command," Cole said. He pulled up the tactical display. "The Scourge have committed their main hive fleet to assault Proxima Station. Intelligence estimates over 200 capital ships and support craft." Zarakth studied the numbers. Proxima Station was one of 3 primary shipyards in this sector. If it fell, the Council's ability to replace losses would be crippled. The Scourge knew this. They were betting everything on this assault. "What are our forces?" she asked, though she already knew. 73 capital ships, 42 human, 31 council, plus support craft and fighters. Cole's expression was grim. "We are outnumbered nearly 3-1, 3-1. By normal military thinking, those were losing odds. A smart commander would fall back, regroup, and wait for reinforcements. But Zarakth had learned that humans did not think like normal commanders. "What is Admiral Brooks's recommendation?" she asked. Admiral Andrew Brooks had taken command of the human fleet after Claire's death. He was older now, more worn, but he commanded with a cold fury that made even veteran Scourge commanders think twice. Cole pulled up the Admiral's plan. He is proposing what he calls a hammer and anvil strategy. The Council fleet forms a defensive line at Proxima Station. The human fleet conducts a flanking maneuver through the Kepler Nebula, hit the Scourge from behind while they are engaged with our defensive line. The nebula's gravity makes navigation nearly impossible. Zarakth objected. Half the fleet could be lost just trying to get through. That is what the Scourge think too, which is why they will not expect it. Cole's smile was predatory. Admiral Brooks sent this note. "We have done impossible things before. Time to do it again." Zarakth felt a familiar sensation, the same feeling she had aboard the Eagle's Pride 2 years ago. Fear mixed with excitement. The knowledge that she was about to do something completely insane. "Send confirmation to the Admiral," she said. "We are committed. Prep the fleet for the approach through the nebula." The next 6 hours were a lesson in human audacity. The human fleet entered the Kepler Nebula. It was a region of space so chaotic that most species considered it impossible to cross. Gravity eddies from a collapsed star created unpredictable distortions. Sensor readings were unreliable. Navigation was a nightmare. But human pilots had been training for exactly this kind of flying since their species first reached the stars. They called it thread-the-needle operations. High-risk, high-reward maneuvers that relied on split-second timing and nerves of steel. Ships were lost in the crossing. 3 human frigates and 1 council cruiser succumbed to gravity forces that tore their hulls apart. But the rest made it through. They emerged on the far side battered but intact, and completely undetected by the Scourge fleet. The Battle of Proxima Station would be studied in military academies for generations. The Scourge, confident in their numbers, had committed to a frontal assault on the station's defensive line. They were grinding forward, accepting casualties but steadily pushing the Council fleet back. Then the human fleet appeared behind them. Admiral Brooks did not waste time with warnings or preliminary fire. The human fleet opened up with everything simultaneously: nuclear warheads, kinetic impactors, plasma lances, weapons the Council did not even know humanity had developed. 12 Scourge capital ships disappeared in the first 30 seconds. The Scourge fleet, caught between 2 forces, tried to split their attention. It was a fatal mistake. The humans pressed their advantage with savage intensity. The Council fleet, seeing an opening, pushed forward from their defensive positions. Zarakth commanded the Vengeance with precision, born from 2 years of constant combat. She had learned human tactics. She had adopted their willingness to take risks. But she applied them with Velkhari discipline and coordination. The result was devastating. Scourge Dreadnought at 285 Mark 40, Cole called out. She is trying to break through our line. Intercept course, Zarakth ordered. All batteries target their engineering section. Fighter wings, I want that ship swarmed. The Vengeance dove toward the massive Scourge vessel, weapons blazing. Human fighters, piloted by men and women who had grown up in the shadow of this war, attacked the Dreadnought like ancient Earth fighter planes attacking a battleship. One fighter pilot, a young woman named Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, pulled off an impossibly risky move. She dove her damaged fighter directly into the Dreadnought's main reactor vent. She detonated her remaining missiles at point-blank range. The Dreadnought's reactor went critical. The massive ship tore itself apart from within. Zarakth felt the now familiar mix of pride and sorrow. Another human life spent to save others, another name to remember, another sacrifice to honor. But there was no time to mourn. The battle raged on. For 6 hours, the space around Proxima Station became a killing field. Ships exploded, lives ended by the thousands. The void filled with debris and frozen bodies, but the human fleet never wavered. When their missiles ran dry, they used railguns. When those overheated, they rammed. One human destroyer, crippled and adrift, used its last power to crash into a Scourge carrier. They died together in a mutual death embrace. And slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. The Scourge, for all their biological advantages and numbers, had never faced an enemy like this. Every other species fought to minimize casualties, to preserve forces for future battles. Humans fought to win regardless of the cost. The Scourge fleet broke. It was subtle at first. A few ships at the edges began to withdraw, then more. Then, in a cascade that spoke of complete loss of control, the entire Scourge fleet turned and ran. Admiral Brooks gave the order Zarakth had been both hoping for and dreading. All ships pursue and destroy. No survivors. No mercy. The human fleet gave chase with predatory efficiency. This was not warfare anymore. This was an execution. By the time the pursuit ended 3 hours later, the Scourge Hive fleet had been completely destroyed. 200 capital ships reduced to scattered debris. Hundreds of thousands of Scourge warriors dead. The human fleet had lost 18 capital ships and countless smaller craft. Over 12,000 human lives. But they had won. In the aftermath, as damage control teams worked to save wounded ships and recover bodies, Zarakth stood on the bridge of the Vengeance. She stared at the tactical display. The red icons representing Scourge forces were gone. The system was secure. Commander Cole approached. His uniform was scorched. His face was smudged with soot from a fire in the secondary control room. Admiral Brooks is requesting your presence on his flagship, Cole said quietly. Says it is important. An hour later, Zarakth stood in the observation deck of the human flagship Indomitable. Admiral Brooks was there, along with several other high-ranking officers from both human and council forces. Battle Commander Zarakth, Brooks said formally. Thank you for coming. I wanted you to hear this first, before it becomes public. He pulled up a holographic display showing intelligence data from deep space probes. We have located the Scourge homeworld, he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. For decades, the Scourge homeworld had been a myth, a target that everyone sought but no one could find. The Scourge protected its location with fanatical secrecy. How? Zarakth asked. We captured a Scourge command vessel during the battle, extracted the navigation data from its organic computer before the crew could destroy it. Brooks's expression was grim. The homeworld is deep in uncharted space, heavily defended, but vulnerable. You are planning an assault, Zarakth said. It was not a question. More than that, we are planning to end this war. Brooks met her gaze steadily. The council is debating whether to authorize the operation. It will take everything we have, every ship, every soldier, and we will lose a lot of them. He gestured to the viewport, where the debris field from the battle still glittered in the starlight. But if we do not do this, if we keep fighting this defensive war, we will bleed out over decades. They will grind us down until there is nothing left. The only way to win is to take the fight to them, to make them fear us the way we have feared them. Zarakth thought about all the battles she had fought, all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made, Jake Martinez dying to save Claire Brooks. Claire Brooks dying to save her. Captain Grant and her crew choosing death to buy time for strangers. And she thought about 3 weeks later, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history departed for the Scourge homeworld. Over 400 capital ships from a dozen species. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And at the front leading the way were the human vessels. Vengeance, Fury, Justice, Retribution, Indomitable. And one new ship. Fresh from the shipyards bearing a name that made Zarakth's throat tighten every time she saw it. Eagle's Pride II. Named for the ship that had sacrificed itself at Harmony Station. Named for Captain Grant and her crew. Named for Claire Brooks and Jake Martinez and all the others who had paid the ultimate price. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. They were heading into the unknown. Into what would likely be the bloodiest battle in history. The journey took 5 days. 5 days of preparation. 5 days of checking weapons and saying silent prayers. 5 days of knowing that many would not return. Zarakth spent much of that time on the bridge of the Vengeance, reviewing tactical plans with Cole and her senior staff. But in the quiet moments, she found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From a proud Velkhari warrior who had never known true fear, to a battle commander who understood that fear was not weakness but strength. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Scourge home system, what they saw took everyone's breath away. The system had 3 planets. 2 were barren rocks, but the third was covered in the organic structures the Scourge used for habitation. Massive hive complexes that sprawled across continents. Bioships by the thousands orbiting the world like a swarm of angry insects. And defending it all was a fleet that made their previous encounters look like minor skirmishes. Over 500 Scourge capital ships. Support craft beyond counting. Orbital defense platforms that bristled with weapons. Sensors are reading multiple Scourge Queen signatures on the planet's surface, Cole reported. His voice was steady, but Zarakth could hear the tension. This is not just their homeworld. This is their breeding center. Everything the Scourge are comes from here. Admiral Brooks's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks. You all know what we are here to do. This is not a raid. This is not a battle. This is an extermination. The Scourge have proven they cannot coexist with other life. They have killed billions. They have destroyed hundreds of worlds. Today we end them, he paused. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less determined. Many of us will not survive this day. I will not lie to you about that. But those who do survive will live in a galaxy free from this threat. Our children will not have to fight this war. That is what we are buying with our lives today. That is worth any price. Another pause. For all those we have lost. For all those we protect. For the future. All ships attack formation. Begin the assault. The fleet surged forward as one. 400 ships against 500. 400 ships carrying the combined fury of a dozen species that had suffered under Scourge aggression for too long. The Scourge fleet moved to intercept. The space between the two forces became hell itself. Zarakth had been in many battles, but this was different. This was not about territory or resources. This was about survival. One species or the other would not leave this system alive. The Vengeance led a spearhead formation of mixed human and council ships. Their mission was to punch through the Scourge defensive line and target the orbital platforms. Without those platforms, the fleet could begin bombardment of the planet's surface. All power to forward shields, Zarakth commanded. All batteries, continuous fire. Do not stop shooting until we are through their line or we are dead. The Vengeance dove into the enemy formation like a blade. Ships exploded around them, both enemy and friendly. The void filled with debris and fire and death. A Scourge battleship loomed ahead. Its bioplasma cannons were charging. Zarakth did not flinch. Ramming speed, she ordered. Cole looked at her in surprise. But he carried out the order. The Vengeance accelerated. At the last second, Zarakth gave another command. All hands, brace for impact. Fire all forward missiles on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Every missile in the forward tubes launched simultaneously. They struck the Scourge battleship's hull and detonated. The explosion tore a massive hole in the enemy vessel. The Vengeance shot through the gap, debris scraping against their shields. They were through the line. Target those platforms, Zarakth ordered. Burn them down. The Vengeance and her formation concentrated their fire on the nearest orbital platform. It was massive, the size of a small moon, but it was also a target that could not dodge. Under concentrated fire from 20 ships, the platform's shields failed. Then its structure failed. It broke apart in a silent explosion that briefly outshone the system's star. 1 down. 11 more to go. The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides. The casualty reports came in constantly, each one a knife to Zarakth's heart. But she could not stop. Could not slow down. The mission was all that mattered. Slowly, impossibly, the Allied fleet was winning. The humans fought with their usual savage determination. But now the other Council species fought the same way. They had learned from humanity. They had learned that sometimes survival requires total commitment. One by one, the orbital platforms fell. One by one, gaps appeared in the Scourge defensive line. Then came the moment Zarakth would remember forever. Admiral Brooks's flagship, the Indomitable, had taken severe damage. Its shields were down. Its engines were failing. A Scourge super dreadnought was moving in for the kill. Without thinking, without hesitating, Zarakth gave an order that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. All ships in formation, follow me. We are going to save the Admiral. The Vengeance turned and accelerated toward the Indomitable. The rest of the formation followed. They interposes themselves between Brooks's ship and the super dreadnought. The enemy vessel opened fire. The Vengeance shook under the impact. Alarm screamed. Systems failed. But they held the line. Return fire, Zarakth ordered calmly. Target their weapon systems. Cole, get me a firing solution for a full spread. Got it, Cole replied. His hands flew over the controls. Solution locked. Fire. Every weapon the Vengeance had left fired at once. Missiles, railguns, plasma cannons, energy beams. All of it converged on the super dreadnought's weapon ports. The enemy ship's weapons exploded. Secondary explosions ripped through its hull. It began to break apart. Admiral Brooks is signaling. The communications officer reported. Put him through. Brooks's face appeared on the screen. It was covered in blood and grime. But he was smiling. Thank you, Battle Commander. That was some fine flying. We do not leave family behind, Zarakth replied. A wise human once taught me that. Brooks' smile widened. Claire would be proud. Now let us finish this. The battle continued. More ships fell. More lives were lost, but the tide had turned irreversibly. The Scourge were losing. When the last orbital platform fell, Admiral Brooks gave the final order. All ships begin orbital bombardment. Target the hive complexes. Leave nothing alive. The fleet opened fire on the planet below. Nuclear warheads. Kinetic strikes. Plasma bombardment. The Scourge homeworld burned. It was not clean. It was not pretty. It was genocide. But it was necessary. The Scourge had proven they could not be reasoned with. Could not be contained. This was the only way. When it was over, when the planet's surface was a scorched wasteland incapable of supporting life, the fleet regrouped. The casualty reports were devastating. 147 ships lost, over 90,000 lives, both human and non-human. But the Scourge were gone. Completely. Utterly. Forever. In the observation deck of the Vengeance, Zarakth stood alone, looking at the dead world below. She thought about all the lives lost to get here. Jake Martinez, Claire Brooks, Captain Grant and her crew, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, tens of thousands of others whose names she would never know. Commander Cole said I would find you here. She turned. Admiral Brooks stood in the doorway. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. The weight of command and loss had aged him. It is over, Zarakth said quietly. The war is over. Yes, Brooks agreed. He came to stand beside her. At a terrible cost. But it is over. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the dead world turn slowly below. What will you do now? Brooks asked. I will return to my people, Zarakth said, and I will tell them everything I have learned. About courage, about sacrifice, about what it means to stand with others against the darkness. She looked at Brooks. I came into this war thinking I understood what it meant to be a warrior, but humans taught me something different. You taught me that true warriors do not fight because they are strong. They fight because they are afraid. Afraid of losing what they love, and that fear makes them stronger than any physical power ever could. Brooks nodded slowly. You honor us with those words. And you honor my daughter's memory. She saved my life, Zarakth said. I will spend the rest of mine making sure that sacrifice meant something. It already does, Brooks replied. Look around you. Humans and council species fighting side by side, learning from each other, growing stronger together. That is Claire's legacy. That is all their legacies. He was right. The war had changed everything. Humanity had brought something new to the galaxy. Not just military might, but a philosophy.